Nice to show you some of Rich Kass over here, his drum music.
Hey.
And
the drum pad.
How you doing, man? We'll just a quick check-in. We're halfway there.
Yeah.
No one's had any full meltdowns or anything, but
there's definitely I think it's not a state secret that there are some tensions in the room at recording at different points. I probably had a bit of a dip last night and this morning, but now feeling pretty good.
You got some really good drum stuff earlier today. I think that gives us a real boost.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It gives everyone a boost, but definitely yourself when you record something and you capture an improvisation that's great.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
I guess I probably had a bit of anxiety about. We did some drum solos this morning for a tune called Concertinas for Bell, but we changed the tempo of it because we thought it'd sound cool to have a shell into it, and it was at 160 BPM, and I've not really played that form at that tempo before, so I guess I was a little bit like, oh, I'm gonna be able to say anything interesting, it was at around about 140, and the difference in vocabulary between those two tempos is quite different. Like at 140 you can play a lot of sextuplets, quintuplets, maybe septuplets, but when you get to 160 the sextuplets and the septuplets are just a little bit too fast to play. Anyway, I think we've got some interesting stuff. So
Yeah.
But we were chatting about pads, right?
Yeah, I thought it would be cool. Let's have a look at Rich's drum music. So I never really look at it. Show us, what do you got there?
Okay.
There's loads of black on that page.
Yeah, so we've got, this is like a bunch of my music for the session, right? And the first thing you'll probably notice that's different from Ants, if you watched earlier, is that I don't have mine on an iPad. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I'm a bit of a Luddite, not as much as Richard Harrold. But two, I kind of like having the charts because I can print them off if anything happens pretty easily, whereas if I had an iPad, I sort of feel like it's probably going to fall over at some point and break, and I'd need to carry these anyway.
Yeah, but then when we go back to the beginning of a tune in rehearsal, you're like, okay, just give me 1 second, and then you get them, and then you're like,
yeah, it's true.
Where's my... Oh no.
It's all kind of loose leaf, Earl Grey and the loose leaves. And yeah, if you ever go to a concert, you'll see that I throw the sheets down as we do them. So by the end of a gig, there's always sheet music everywhere. But because we were chatting about pads and there's loads of music here, I've just picked two things which I thought are kind of interesting to chat about, or there might be some stuff which is of interest to people. So the first one is, this is my entire chart for a tune called Stellar, which is based on Stella by Starlight. I'll let you see here. And it's quite a long composition. It's got a lot of sections. There's an intro, then there's a head, there's the head B, there's the first solo, then there's the bridge, then there's the drum solo.
Yeah.
No, the drum solo comes before the bridge, sorry. And then there's the coda.
How have you got
two parts? So the only music I have for that is the bridge. I've memorized everything else, and that's something I definitely try and do with the tracks when possible, is memorize them. Just for a performance point of view, I kind of feel like I play better when everything's coming from here out instead of off the page, and I guess everyone's different with that. This particular part I find quite difficult to memorize. I could definitely get it together if I had loads of time, but we have a lot of music to learn, so that's tricky. And one of the reasons it's difficult to memorize is there's in this part there's lots of time signatures and things, as you can see, but the drums are playing two things at once. They're playing three things at once. They're playing the time signatures, they're picking out this melodic phrase which the piano's playing and the guitar is picking out as well, and they're also playing this kind of false time feel with the feet. And when there's that level of detail going on, for me it takes a bit more time to memorize, because you've got to personally have to sort of picture how one rhythm fits against another, and there's a lot of that happens in all the trio tunes. That often I see the drums as sort of the unifying thing, so maybe they're kind of interacting with the guitar and the piano, or interacting with one thing and also playing clearly the meter or something at the same time. But this is just kind of difficult to memorize. So the first thing I guess I want to say about my pad is that I do as much of it from memory as possible, And for a while, I would never write a drum part out. So this has got what the drums are playing kind of verbatim pretty much.
Right, so exactly, so the top line is sort of hi-hat, the low line is bass, drum, and the ones in the middle is toms and snare or something.
Yeah.
Right.
I tend to always write stuff, what they call all staves up, in case anyone's interested. So instead of having a bottom line for your feet often or whatever, and a top line for the hands, I write stuff together because I guess one of my big things about coordination or independence or whatever you want to chat about is I believe that like when you're playing multiple rhythms, it's harmonic coordination. So like you understand how one rhythm sits against the other and what rhythm they create when you play them together. So I like to see things written out together because that's how I think about rhythm when I'm not reading. Is like if I'm playing like a clave or something else and then a rhythm on top of it, in my head I sort of can see how those rhythms work and where they play together and where they play apart and what rhythm they create when you're playing two together. So
one sec. Just like to have a word from our sponsors.
Cloudwater
Beer, an amazing brewery in Manchester. They make the most delicious beer I've ever drunk. They're not really our sponsor, but please, Cloudwater, if you're watching, sponsor us. Mr. Cloudwater, Mrs. Cloudwater. Sorry, what were you saying?
I forgot. Yeah, pretty much. So one final thing I'd say about this is I've explained why I use that notation system. I would never ever write any drum parts out when we first started playing this music because I felt like it was like cheating. You know, like a big band drummer or something, you would get a chart which had the parts and you would hear what to play and fit inside of it. And I still, as much as possible, take that approach. But I sort of figured at one point, like, this is kind of contemporary classical music where like there's intricate written parts at points, and so it's okay to write that out. But it's taken a while for me to feel that's okay to do. And when I do that, the most important thing is being able to actually think about what everybody else is doing and hear it all together and not just read the part and play through it. Like, and I guess that's a big thing.
Sometimes it can be a bit of a nasty surprise when we learn our parts individually at home. This happened with concertinas, you remember?
Oh, yeah.
This part which we ended up calling the vortex, because once we started to practice it, we realized there were always things that other people were doing, maybe a 16th note, you know, a very tiny bit of rhythm just before you play yourself. And so it was really confusing. So you practice at home and be like, yeah, this is fine. But all of a sudden, with the, we call it, you know, pulling the rug out from under you. Like, and then when we got together, it was like, right. And it was twofold. Because for me, you and Rich would have these different alignments. And the only way in those bits, the only way of dealing with it is, as you've said, to learn what other people are doing so that you know exactly how everything's kind of locked, because we try to leave some sort of openness in the time field in parts of the music, but for some of it we actually don't want that. For some bits it has to be really crystallized, like a lattice for the rhythms to actually cycle in the correct way and feel how we want them to feel.
And I think that's an interesting point, because that's like almost exactly the same way I think about playing multiple drum rhythms on the drum set when it's just me. It's like you've got to know how they all interact, and I think that as much as possible we do that as a trio. So when we're playing this hectic music where things seem to be crisscrossing each other and sometimes arriving together and sometimes coming apart, the vast majority of the time we're kind of aware how they all work together, like you say. And I think like sometimes that's a lot of the work in learning the music, is actually understanding how it works in context. The part you could probably play your own sometimes within a few minutes sight reading, but to make it sound good collectively is where all the work is. And just because you mentioned that, this is my chart for the head of a tune called Concertinas for Bill. You can probably see that I've got a sketch of what the drum part is. This isn't actually what the drums are playing, but it's kind of loosely what it is. But you'll see there's loads of scrolls there, and those scrolls are all of Ant's bass guitar rhythms. You can probably see, so this is like all your rhythms for the head.
That's cool, yeah, so you really know.
And when I practice that...
You know where I think I am.
Yeah. And when I practice it, I would sing the bass guitar part while playing this rhythm. And sometimes like there's bits here where my rhythm sits like one subdivision away from ants, and it's like right in the middle, so you've got to like sing one rhythm and place it with it. And I guess like for me, when I started realizing that mastering rhythm is much more about singing and clapping than it is about playing your instrument all the time, is when things like became a lot easier to do all the time. So like, but same with playing the drums. Like so much of like being a good drummer and a good musician can be done by singing and clapping, not by sitting down in the kit. And maybe if we should probably move on because we might be needed soonish. But I've got
a question for you in a minute, by the way.
All right. Shall I do this or should we?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll ask you.
So I picked another bit of music which is interesting. So this is from a track we have not yet recorded. It's called 5, which is based on 4. And this is a coda which comes out of a drum solo, and I sort of see as an extension of the drum solo. So this coda part looks like this. And I'll show it to Ant in a second. So what you'll see is that 1, there's no drums really written in, and 2, there's no time signatures written in, and 3, every bar is a different length.
I guess that explains why there's no time signature, because there would be so many that it wouldn't be helpful.
Yeah, and I think I thought it'd be interesting to say that there are 2 ways that we think about playing a lot of the rhythmic forms we play. I mean, there are lots of ways, but 2 ones that we always tend to do. One is to be able to play the time signatures, and the other is to be able to play the groupings, like what rhythms might be crossing the time signatures. And in the track that we've just recorded, called Concertinas for Bill, we move between sometimes playing the time signatures and sometimes playing the rhythms and sometimes playing the combinations of both. But with this particular piece, the time signatures are sort of irrelevant because it's much more about the groupings that are going on. So like the first few bars, the time signature would be 6/16, 6/16, 10/16, 9/16, 6/16, 8/16, 5 coda.
Okay.
But in this particular section, I'm thinking much more of how things are grouped: 3, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 5, 3, whatever. And then within that, because this is kind of a drum solo, I'm looking at those groupings and maybe treating them a little bit similar to how an improviser might look at a chord symbol, and that's to say, like, you see what that grouping is, and then you can think of possibilities. So for a group of 3, you've got, for any drummers out there, like you've got any kind of sticking which is 3 notes long, or any 6-note sticking if you play at double the speed of the subdivision, plus simple things you can do. You can play 4 in a time of 3, 1 in a time of 3, 2 in a time of 3. Those are all quite easy rhythms to play. And so, like, just by looking at the grouping, there's a lot of possibilities that come up if you're thinking on that kind of more kind of micro level. And then you can use the changing groupings as a way to develop an idea. Like, if you've got 2, 2, and then a 3, you could treat that as a grouping of 7. There's loads of 7 vocabulary we can all think of. But you could also play like 2 notes in the 2 and 2 notes in the time of 3, so you get the same idea twice, but the second one sounds like it's speeding up, or like, or all kinds of possibilities.
That's just a very, very simple mathematical sort of relationship, but
Yeah, and I guess like when you play through this stuff a bunch, you start to get a sort of gut feeling for what the groupings are and what you can play. And again, you'll see there's loads of scrolls on here because Rich and Ant are both playing different rhythms with this, which the drums are picking out. So I see it as a sort of like a bit of a kaleidoscope or something, where the drums are kind of soloing and then it's smashing a piano chord and then it's picking out these like sort of more staccato guitar things, and then it's open for a while. And so it's really fun to play, but I am quite scared to record this because the drum solo comes before this and kind of plays into this. There's a lot of dense rhythm. I mean, like, every single bar is kind of different on that chart, and I've got to play that at the end of a successful drum solo.
When are we doing that? We're doing that tomorrow.
Oh shit. Yeah, excuse my French. So, open the door to questions.
Yeah.
Really. I think those were the things I thought might be interesting.
First of all, thanks for watching, those of you who are watching. Do send any questions. Rich, did you catch D'Angelo on this tour, or do you like is there an album? I don't know D'Angelo too well. I know Voodoo because Charlie Hunter's on it, and I am a big fan of Charlie. In fact, that's he's one of very few people who play 8 strings. although he does, he's amazing. He's completely different. I think he's back on 7th string now as well. But
also fan frets
as well, yeah, exactly.
Now Sporting.
Yeah.
So
that album or tour, tell me.
I had tickets for this tour, but I couldn't go. I can't remember why. I think I had a gig that I couldn't say no to. I need to remember that.
I hate that, man. It's a real sad thing about being a musician. Yeah. When you have to do a gig, but there's a great gig in town, but like you need the money or something. It's quite sad, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I'm ashamed to say that I have not seen D'Angelo live, and it's kind of on my wish list to see, especially if he's playing with Pino and Chris Dave.
Nice.
Like a lot of rhythm section, and
I was just about to say what do you like about it, but you've kind of answered it there with Pino and Chris Dave.
I mean, I
just love both of them.
Yeah, there's so much in that music. Like, one, I'm a big fan of hip hop and neo soul and stuff, and so I kind of just the sort of general aesthetic. But when you go into his approach to time and stuff has been at points a little bit fuck you, D'Angelo. He's been a real innovator, and then also Questlove and Pino have been real innovators with their approach to time. And when you put all that together, but I think the first thing I heard of D'Angelo's was that tune Untitled, How Does It Feel? The 6/8 or 12/8 thing.
The really slow one where it's really back on the beat.
The bass is almost a semiquaver behind the voice or whatever. Yeah. And this album, Black Messiah's got some really random stuff happening in both the pitching and the rhythm. But
is that track on that album?
No, it's on Voodoo.
Okay, Chicken Grease as well has got a really nice guitar part that I think has been I listened to this poddy that you turned me on to. We love to listen to podcasts, especially in the last couple of years when we couldn't kind of hang in person with musicians at gigs and whatever, recording sessions. We would listen to lots of podcasts. I'm sure you all did the same, but the Eric Krasno +1 poddy's great. And Charlie Hunter was talking about how he recorded with Amir, Questlove and D'Angelo, and then they actually moved his parts late. And Charlie was saying that the idea of that of a part being, and it was either in early or late, was unimaginable to him because of what he'd grown up with. But the thing is, I don't know which direction he was saying. I think he might have been saying that it should be really in front or on the nose. But Charlie Hunter's really groovy, so obviously whatever he's having or whatever he's doing is I want some of that. But yeah, there's a good podcast, Eric Krasno +1, and I enjoyed the Charlie Hunter one. I think you turned me on to that, poddy.
Yeah, I haven't heard the Charlie one though. I need to listen to that. One thing that's quite interesting about chatting about this stuff as well is that obviously we're all really into rhythm, and some people's perception may be that everything we do is just about super precise, complex or whatever, and that's really not the case. One of the most fascinating things about rhythm is phrasing, is the relationship between things being in front and behind, or something stating a time clearly and something being loose, or there being a certain amount of looseness which is the same every time, or it's kind of endless. And I think we actually are trying to explore that side of things as much as the sort of precise side of things. Rhythm
in all its forms, we love it dearly. We kind of devoted a large part of our lives in the last decade to the study and enjoyment of rhythm, I think, collectively and individually. So cool. Yeah. Well, should we let people get back to their Saturday afternoon activities?
Oh, yeah, it's Saturday today, isn't it?
It is Saturday.
I think we've timed that good because I think they're ready for you.
Yeah. I think so. All right. Thanks, people. We'll see you again maybe later or tomorrow. Peace.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in.